Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes. What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, a man known for his philosophical wisdom and Texas charm, walks into the lion's den of daytime television and gets ambushed with the most loaded question imaginable? What unfolds isn't just another celebrity interview. It's a surgical dissection of media manipulation tactics. A moment of such devastating clarity that it left one of America's most aggressive interviewers completely speechless and exposed the entire game of political journalism for what it really is. This is the story of the day Matthew McConaughey walked onto the View set, faced down JoyBehar's carefully constructed trap, and delivered a response so perfectly calibrated, so brilliantly executed that it became an instant masterclass in how to refuse to be pigeonholed by the media establishment. Before we dive deep into this incredible moment, understand something crucial about what you're about to witness. This isn't just a celebrity dodging an uncomfortable question. This isn't just another talk show disagreement that gets hyped up for clicks. What you're about to read is a moment when the curtain got ripped back on exactly how political media operates in America, when the manipulation tactics got exposed in real time on live television, and when a Texas-born Oscar winner reminded an entire panel of seasoned journalists that not everyone in Hollywood plays by their rules. The confrontation itself lasted mere seconds, one question, one devastating response. But the impact reverberated through social media for days, sparking fierce debates about media manipulation, political pigeonholing, binary thinking, and whether celebrities should be forced to declare simplistic allegiances on command. What makes this moment so legendary, so worth analyzing in excruciating detail, is the sheer surgical precision of Matthew's response. He didn't stumble. He didn't deflect awkwardly. He didn't get defensive or angry or flustered. Instead, he did something far more devastating. He named the game being played, called out explicitly, and refused to participate all in a single sentence that would be analyzed, replayed, and celebrated by millions of people who were exhausted with the endless cycle of gotcha journalism and soundbite warfare. This was verbal Aikido at its absolute finest, and JoyBehar never saw it coming. The morning of the interview started with such promise, such innocent normalcy. The View set was bathed in its familiar warm lighting. The studio audience settled into their seats with excited anticipation, buzzing with energy at the prospect of seeing Matthew McConaughey in person. The production crew went through their well-rehearsed routines, cameras positioned perfectly, sound levels checked and double-cheed, everything running like the well-oiled machine it had become over decades of broadcasting. Matthew McConaughey was scheduled as a marquee guest there to discuss his recent appearance at the U.S. Open tennis finals, his family life with wife Camila and their 3 children, and most importantly, most meaningfully, his Green Lights Grant Initiative, a program designed to help schools across America access billions of dollars in federal safety funding that was sitting unused. It should have been straightforward, pleasant, easy morning television where a beloved celebrity promotes worthy causes and shares heartwarming stories about family and friendship. Standard promotional fare for one of Hollywood's most charismatic A-listers. The kind of appearance that publicists dream about and producers love because it's guaranteed to deliver good ratings without any drama or controversy. Matthew entered the studio with that trademark laid-back confidence that had made him a star. That easy Texas swagger that somehow managed to be both humble and commanding at the same time. He greeted the audience with a warm smile and a casual wave, his entire demeanor radiating the kind of authentic charm that can be faked or manufactured. The audience responded enthusiastically, their applause genuine and sustained, clearly delighted to have this Oscar-winning actor, this cultural icon, this genuinely interesting human being sitting just feet away from them. Here was Matthew McConaughey, star of Dallas Buyers Club, Interstellar, True Detective, The Lincoln Lawyer, and dozens of other memorable films. A man who'd somehow managed to remain likable and grounded despite decades in the Hollywood machine. What could possibly go wrong? The panel greeted him warmly, each host offering their own version of a welcome. Whoopi Goldberg, the veteran moderator, provided her customary professional greeting with just a hint of genuine pleasure at having such a high-caliber guest. Sarah Haynes beamed with excitement, clearly thrilled to be interviewing someone she genuinely admired. Sunny host offered respectful acknowledgement, her body language indicating sincere interest in what Matthew had to say. Even Alyssa Farah Griffin, the newest addition to the panel, seemed genuinely pleased to have him on set. The energy was positive, warm, collaborative, exactly the kind of atmosphere that makes for great television. Everything was proceeding exactly as Matthew's publicist and the View's producers had discussed in their pre-end coordination. Friendly territory, softball questions, mutual respect, easy promotion, safe morning television that would make everyone look good and give Matthew a platform to discuss causes he genuinely cared about. No controversy, no drama, no gotcha moments, just good, clean promotional entertainment. But JoyBehar sat unusually quiet during those opening moments of warmth and welcome. And anyone who'd watched The View religiously over the years would recognize that particular expression on her face. It wasn't hostility, exactly. It wasn't obvious antagonism. It was something more subtle, more calculating, a predatory patience, like a cat watching a bird, waiting for precisely the right moment to pounce. She smiled at the appropriate moments, nodded along when others spoke, maintained facade of engaged interest. But beneath the surface, anyone who understood Joy's patterns could sense something else entirely. She was loading her ammunition, checking her sights, preparing for a strike that would come when Matthew least expected it, when his guard was down, when he thought he was safe. Those who knew Joy's style understood what was brewing beneath that calm exterior. Even if Matthew himself hadn't fully anticipated the trap, being meticulously constructed around him, with every passing minute of seemingly innocent conversation, the first several minutes of the interview flowed with practiced ease and genuine warmth. Questions about the U.S. Open tennis finals, where Matthew had been spotted sitting in Novak Djokovic's box during the men's championship match. Stories about the Serbian tennis legend sprinting to embrace Matthew after securing his victory. That iconic moment captured by cameras and shared across social media. Laughter and genuine delight as Matthew explained the connection through his wife, Camila, how she'd been friends with Djokovic long before Matthew entered the picture, how their relationship had grown through dinners and conversations over the years. What a surgeon and a warrior Matthew said about Djokovic. His admiration genuine and unguarded. The resilience of what he's done is amazing. I was happy to be in his box. Got to sit behind his parents, which was really awesome to see them when he brings them up. His Texas drawl made every word feel authentic, real, like he was talking to friends rather than performing for cameras. The audience responded warmly to these stories, laughing at the right moments, sighing appreciatively at the touching details. The other hosts nodded along, asking follow-up questions that kept the conversation flowing smoothly. This was good television, a beloved celebrity, sharing genuine moments of connection with sports legends, humanizing himself while elevating others. Perfect morning fare that made everyone feel good without challenging anyone or creating any uncomfortable moment. The conversation shifted naturally to family, and Matthew's entire demeanor softened in a way that was impossible to fake. Questions about his 3 children, 15-year-old Levi, 13-year-old Vita, and 10-year-old Livingston. "What kind of dad are you?" someone asked. And Matthew laughed that warm, genuine laugh that charmed audiences for decades. "That's probably a loaded question," he joked. "I'm a good dad. We got 20 minutes for this answer." The audience laughed with him, sensing they were about to hear something real, something beyond the typical celebrity parent platitudes about how blessed they were and how children changed everything. And Matthew delivered, opening up with a depth and vulnerability that transcended typical talk show conversations. "Being a dad was the only thing that I ever knew I wanted to be," he said, his voice carrying genuine emotion. "I knew that at 8 years old, I remember shaking hands with my dad's friends who would introduce me to big, strong men, and I noticed that everyone I would say yes, sir, to over the years was a father. I was like, that's my aspiration. That's when you become a sir." As a man, the studio fell into an appreciative silence, everyone processing this genuinely beautiful sentiment. This wasn't Hollywood polish or carefully crafted PR messaging. This was real reflection from someone who clearly thought deeply about fatherhood, identity, and what it meant to be a man in the world. Matthew continued discussing how DNA manifests in unexpected ways, how his children came out as fully formed individuals with distinct personalities that had remained remarkably consistent from infancy through their current ages. The same things I was writing about their peculiarities when they were 2, they match with who they are, what I'm writing about them today. It was beautiful television, the kind of moment that reminded viewers why they tuned into talk shows in the first place. To see celebrities as human beings, to connect with shared experiences of parenthood and family, to feel less alone in the challenges and joys of raising children. The panel responded warmly, several hosts nodding with understanding, clearly moved by Matthew's sincerity and the depth of his love for his family. Then the conversation shifted again, this time to weightier, more serious territory, but still within the bounds of what felt safe and pre-approved. The Uvalde school shooting a tragedy that had devastated Matthew's hometown and moved him to passionate advocacy. His appearance at the White House, standing before the nation with his wife, Camila, speaking with such raw emotion about the children who'd been murdered, about the green Converse sneakers that had belonged to one young victim, about the need for action rather than endless thoughts and prayers. JoyBehar, who'd remained relatively quiet up to this point, now spoke up to acknowledge Matthew's advocacy. "I want to applaud you for being so outspoken against violence, and gun violence in particular," she said, her voice carrying what seemed like genuine appreciation. "You're a Texan, and you spoke so passionately at the White House last year in the wake of that shooting at Robb Elementary in your hometown." The panel was all wearing small green pins, a visual reminder of the cause Matthew had championed. His wife had held up those green Converse sneakers at the White House shoes that had belonged to mate Rodriguez, a 10-year-old girl with dreams and potential, all of it erased in seconds of violence that could have been prevented. The image had become iconic, a symbol of loss and the urgent need for action. Matthew nodded solemnly, acknowledging both the tragedy and his ongoing commitment to preventing future one. This led naturally to discussion of his Green Lights Grant Initiative, the practical solutions-focused program he developed to address a specific gap in school safety funding. "Please tell us about it," Joy prompted. And for a moment, it seemed like she was genuinely interested in substantive discussion about a program that could save lives. Matthew explained with clarity and passion, his expertise on the subject evident in every word. After what happened at Robb Elementary and many other schools, the first bill was passed in 30 years to help make schools safer by Partisan Safer Communities Act. Billions of dollars to safeguard schools. He paused, letting the significance sink in. "What I found out months after the bill was passed is that very few applications are going in from the school districts, and for those that are applying, very few are getting granted and awarded. The money is still there." He leaned forward slightly, his body language conveying the urgency of the problem. "We found out that these superintendent staffs, the people who need to fill out these grants to the government, a lot of them are driving the school bus, and they're the PE teacher. This grant process is 50 pages. And it's intimidating. I don't know about y'all, but I have trouble making it through filling a customs card out without having to scratch stuff out." The audience laughed, recognizing the relatable frustration, but Matthew's point was deadly serious. They don't have the expertise or the time. The government wants these grants to be filed. They want to spend the money. It's use it or lose it money. And if we don't spend that money by 2026, it could be reallocated. This was substantive, important work, identifying a specific problem and creating a practical solution, not just raising awareness or making speeches, but actually building infrastructure to help small school districts access funding that could literally save children's lives. The panel listened attentively, several hosts nodding with apparent appreciation for the concrete nature of Matthew's advocacy. This wasn't celebrity activism as performance art. This was genuine problem-solving, leveraging fame and resources to make tangible differences. The conversation seemed to be headed toward a natural conclusion. Matthew had explained his initiative clearly, provided actionable information for viewers who wanted to help, and demonstrated the kind of thoughtful advocacy that everyone could respect regardless of political affiliation. It was the perfect note to end on, leaving everyone feeling informed and inspired. But JoyBehar had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. When Matthew's guard was down, when he was feeling comfortable and open, when the conversation had established him as someone genuinely committed to school safety and protecting children, now came the strike. In 2021, Joy said, her voice shifting ever so slightly, taking on that particular tone that regular View watchers recognized instantly as a prelude to a loaded question. You considered a run for governor of the state of Texas, right? Matthew nodded carefully, sensing perhaps the beginning of a shift, but not yet recognizing the trap being sprung. Yes. Do you think political office is in your future? Joy continued, her tone still conversational, but with an edge sharpening beneath the surface. Can you see that? It was a reasonable question on its face, a natural follow-up given Matthew's high-profile advocacy work and his previous consideration of running for office. Matthew answered diplomatically, keeping his options open without committing to anything specific. If it's where I would deem myself to be most useful. Yeah, the audience murmured appreciatively. It was a thoughtful response suggesting genuine consideration about where he could make the most impact rather than blind political ambition. It acknowledged possibility without declaring intention. It was exactly the kind of measured answer that someone genuinely contemplating public service would give. But Joy wasn't asking out of genuine curiosity about Matthew's future plans. She was setting a trap, and now she was about to spring it. Joy leaned forward slightly, that predatory smile playing at the corners of her mouth, her eyes brightening with the anticipation of what she was about to do. The moment had arrived. The trap was set. Now came the question designed to box Matthew into a corner from which there would be no escape, to force him onto the record with a position that could be clipped, shared, weaponized, and used against him regardless of how he answered. Do you think you could get elected in Texas being anti-gun? The temperature in the studio dropped instantly, as if someone had opened a door to the Arctic. The air itself seemed to shift, crackling with sudden tension that everyone in the room could feel in their bones. It was a loaded question. No, it was more than that. It was a weaponized question, a verbal IED carefully constructed and strategically placed, designed to detonate regardless of which wire Matthew chose to cut. The architecture of the trap was brilliant in its cruelty. If Matthew said yes that he could get elected in Texas with an anti-gun platform, he'd be labeled as naive, disconnected from political reality, out of touch with the very constituency he claimed to understand. If he said no, admitting that an anti-gun position would be fatal to his political prospects in Texas, he'd be forced to either defend gun rights positions he didn't actually hold or admit that he'd compromised his principles for political expediency. Either way, Joy would have him on record. His position crystallized into a soundbite that could be replayed forever, dissected endlessly, used to define him in terms chosen by his questioner rather than himself. And embedded in the question was an even more insidious trap, the label anti-gun itself. By accepting that frame, by answering the question as posed, Matthew would be implicitly accepting a characterization of his position that might not accurately reflect his actual beliefs. He'd be allowing someone else to define him in their terms, on their playing field, by their rules. He'd be stepping into the binary thinking that dominates so much of American political discourse, where complex positions on complex issues get reduced to simplistic for or against declarations that leave no room for nuance, no space for thoughtful policy proposals, no acknowledgement that most real people hold positions more sophisticated than can be captured in a single word. The other hosts sense it immediately, their bodies going slightly rigid, several of them shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They recognized the ambush for what it was. Not a genuine inquiry, but a trap designed to create a viral moment regardless of outcome. The audience went quiet, the friendly energy for moments before evaporating instantly as everyone sensed that something significant was about to happen. In the control room, producers likely held their breath, frantically calculating whether this was about to become must-see television or a disaster that would generate weeks of controversy and require damage control. Matthew's face registered the shift instantly. His eyes, which had been warm and open during the discussion of his family and his advocacy work, now narrowed almost imperceptibly. The easy smile didn't disappear entirely, but it changed, became more careful, more guarded. His entire body language shifted from relaxed conversation to active engagement, like a fighter recognizing that the sparring session had suddenly become a real fight. But Matthew McConaughey didn't become one of Hollywood's most respected actors. Someone who'd successfully navigated decades in an industry notorious for chewing up and spitting out talent by being anyone's fool. He didn't survive and thrive by walking into obvious traps just because someone set them in his path. Do I think I could get elected in Texas being anti-gun? Matthew repeated the question slowly, his Texas drawl becoming more pronounced. Each word carefully measured. His eyes locked onto Joy's with laser focus. The wheels were turning behind those famous eyes, processing not just the question itself, but the entire architecture of manipulation beneath it, calculating the best response, the most effective counter move. He paused. The moment stretched, feeling longer than it actually was. Every person in that studio leaned in unconsciously, waiting for his response, anticipating how one of Hollywood's smartest actors would navigate this minefield. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every subtle shift in his posture, every flicker of calculation behind his eyes. Then Matthew McConaughey did something unexpected, something brilliant, something that would be replayed and analyzed and celebrated for days and weeks to come, something that exposed the entire game in a single devastating sentence. His voice took on a steel edge that contrasted sharply with his usual laid-back charm, becoming harder, more direct, cutting to the artificial pleasantries with surgical precision. "One thing about me in politics," he said, his words deliberate and clear, pointing directly at JoyBehar with his finger for emphasis, "is to give you a direct statement. Right, there's playing a game that I'm not interested in playing." The studio went absolutely dead silent, not the anticipatory silence from before. This was something different entirely. This was a shocked silence of people processing something unexpected, something they hadn't seen coming, something that fundamentally changed the dynamic of what they were witnessing. Matthew continued, driving the point home, making sure everyone understood exactly what he was doing and why. "Give you a direct statement right there," he repeated, his finger still pointing at Joy, his eyes never leaving hers, "is playing a game that I'm not interested in playing." Boom. Knockout. Game over. The verbal equivalent of a perfectly executed punch delivered with such surgical precision that JoyBehar, a woman who'd verbally sparred with presidents, celebrities, and politicians of every conceivable stripe, had absolutely no response. The woman who'd built a career on never being at a loss for words, on always having a comeback, on dominating conversations through sheer force of personality and quick wit, sat momentarily speechless. Matthew hadn't just dodged the question. That would have been the expected move, the typical celebrity deflection that everyone had seen 1,000 times before. What he'd done was far more devastating and far more effective. He'd exposed the entire mechanism of the trap in real time, pulled back the curtain on exactly what Joy was attempting to do, named it explicitly for everyone watching, and refused to participate in the manipulation. It was verbal Aikido at its absolute finest, using the force and momentum of the attack against the attacker, redirecting the energy rather than meeting a heat-in, maintaining perfect control while making the opponent's aggression work against them. Joy's face registered multiple emotions in rapid succession, each one flickering across her features for just a split second before being replaced by the next. Surprise at being called out so directly, confusion about how to respond, a flash of something that might have been grudging respect for the sheer brilliance of Matthew's counter-move. And finally settling on uncertainty, a rare state for someone usually so confident and commanding in these situations. For perhaps the first time in years on The View, JoyBehar found herself without an immediate comeback, without a quick retort, without a way to recover control she'd just lost. The trap she'd so carefully constructed had been dismantled before she could even fully spring it, exposed as manipulation rather than genuine inquiry. And she was left holding the pieces with cameras capturing every second of her discomfort. The other hosts exchanged quick glances, their eyebrows raising in surprise and something approaching. Admiration. Whoopi's expression suggested she recognized masterful television when she saw it. Sarah looked genuinely impressed, perhaps even relieved that Matthew had navigated the trap so skillfully. Even Sunny, who tended toward the more aggressive questioning style herself, seemed to appreciate the tactical brilliance of Matthew's response. In the audience, you could see the shift rippling through the crowd, some people nodding in vigorous agreement, others processing what they just witnessed, everyone understanding that something significant and unusual had just occurred. This wasn't the typical celebrity deflection or awkward dodge. This was something entirely different, a direct, explicit calling out of media manipulation tactics in real time, delivered with such calm clarity that it was impossible to dismiss as evasion or cowardice. Matthew's response was devastating in its elegant simplicity. He hadn't attacked Joy personally. He hadn't gotten defensive or angry or flustered. He hadn't launched into a lengthy explanation of his nuanced position on gun policy or a lecture about the complexity of Texas politics. He hadn't tried to answer the question on its own terms or engage with the false binary it presented. Instead, he'd done something far more effective and ultimately more powerful. He'd called out the game itself, identified it explicitly as a game, and announced his refusal to play by rules designed to trap him no matter how he answered. What made the moment so powerful, so memorable, so worthy of the endless analysis it would receive in the hours and days following was its absolute clarity of purpose. In less than 10 seconds, Matthew McConaughey had accomplished what countless other celebrities, politicians, and public figures had failed to do when faced with similar traps. He'd maintained complete control of his narrative, exposed media manipulation tactics for what they were, and done it all without being confrontational or disrespectful in a way that could be used against him later. It was a masterclass in media navigation, a perfect example of how to maintain authenticity and control in an environment specifically designed to strip both away from you. Joy tried to recover, attempted to move the conversation in a different direction, but the moment had been definitively claimed, and there was no taking it back. Matthew had drawn a line in the sand with such precision and clarity that there was nowhere for Joy to go that wouldn't make her look worse. Any follow-up question on the same topic would only reinforce his point that she was trying to pigeonhole him, try and create sound bites rather than having genuine conversation. Any attempt to press him further would expose her tactics even more obviously. The genius of Matthew's response went even deeper than the surface-level brilliance of avoiding the trap. By refusing to play the game, he'd actually revealed far more about his character, his principles, and his intelligence than any direct answer could have possibly communicated. He'd shown that he valued nuance over sound bites, substance over performance, genuine discourse over political theater. He demonstrated tactical intelligence, emotional control, and a fundamental unwillingness to let others define him on their term. For viewers tired of the endless cycle of gotcha journalism and soundbite warfare, and there were millions of such viewers across the political spectrum, Matthew's response was like a breath of fresh air in a room that had been sealed shut for years. It validated their exhaustion with media games. It modeled a different way of engaging with loaded questions. It proved that you could refuse to participate in manipulation without being rude, defensive, or evasive. The interview continued, moving somewhat awkwardly to other topics, but everyone in the studio and everyone watching at home knew that the Real story had already been written. The headline wasn't going to be about Matthew's Greenlight's grand initiative. As important as that work was, it wasn't going to be about his touching reflections on fatherhood or his friendship with Novak Djokovic. The story was about that single moment when Matthew McConaughey looked JoyBehar in the eye and said, "In effect, I see exactly what you're doing. I understand the game you're playing, and I'm not going to participate in it." The remainder of the interview proceeded smoothly enough on the surface, though the energy had fundamentally shifted. Matthew discussed his initiative in more detail, patiently explaining how people could learn more and contribute to helping schools access available funding. He talked briefly about upcoming projects, about his philosophy on work-life balance, about staying grounded despite fame and success. The panel asked questions. The audience applauded at appropriate moments, and everything looked normal to casual viewers who might have tuned in late, but the electric charge from that exchange continued to crackle through the studio. Everyone who'd witnessed the trap and its brilliant dismantling knew they'd seen something special, something that would be discussed and analyzed long after the specifics of Greenlight's grants were forgotten. As the interview wrapped and Matthew stood to leave, shaking hands with each panelist and waving warmly to the audience, something had fundamentally shifted in how people would think about him. He'd walked onto that set as a beloved actor promoting a worthy cause, admired for his talent and likability, but not necessarily taken seriously as a political or intellectual force. He walked off as something more substantial, a symbol of authentic communication in an age of soundbite warfare, a reminder that intelligence and authenticity could coexist with Hollywood success, and proof that you didn't have to play games you didn't want to play, no matter who was demanding your participation or how famous the platform. JoyBehar, for her part, maintained her professional composure for the remainder of the show, moving on to other topics with practiced ease. But everyone who'd watched that exchange knew something significant had occurred, something that couldn't be spun or reinterpreted or dismissed. The hunter had become the hunted, the trap had been exposed, and the person who'd walked into what should have been an ambush had instead walked away with his dignity, his principles, and his narrative completely intact, and had made the person who set the trap look foolish in the process. What started as a routine celebrity interview promoting a school safety initiative became a cultural flashpoint, a masterclass in media navigation, and a viral moment that would be shared millions of times across social media platforms. Within hours of the show airing, clips of the exchange were everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, each platform exploding with reactions, analysis, and debate about what just happened and what it meant. Conservative commentators praised Matthew for standing up to JoyBehar's obvious trap and refusing to be pigeonholed by liberal media gatekeepers. Liberal commentators appreciated his moderate, solution-focused approach to gun policy and his refusal to engage in counterproductive binary thinking. Centrist observers held him up as an example of how productive discourse could exist outside the poisonous extremes that dominated so much of American political conversation. Media analysts dissected the exchange frame by frame, marveling at the tactical brilliance of his response. Across the political spectrum, a common thread emerged: respect for how Matthew had handled the situation. Even people who disagreed with his positions on gun policy or who wanted him to take clearer, more definitive stances on various political issues found themselves admiring the sheer skill of his navigation. He'd maintained his authenticity, refused to be manipulated, and done it all without being an about it. That combination, being principled without being preachy, being firm without being rude, being clear without being simplistic, resonated with millions of Americans who were exhausted with the usual patterns of political discourse. The moment crystallized something many Americans had felt but struggled to articulate: a deep exhaustion with the endless cycle of gotcha questions, soundbite politics, and forced binary choices on issues that were inherently complex and multifaceted. Not everything is black and white. Not every question deserves a simple yes or no answer. Not every trap needs to be walked into just because someone sets it in your path. Sometimes the smartest response, the most authentic response, the most honest response is to refuse the premise of the question itself. Matthew McConaughey understood this instinctively, and on that view set in front of millions of viewers, he demonstrated that understanding with a response that was somehow both devastatingly simple and profoundly sophisticated. 8 words that changed the entire dynamic. That is playing a game I'm not interested in playing. It was a complete rejection of the question's premise, a refusal to accept the anti-gun label as an accurate characterization of his position, an exposure of the manipulation tactics embedded in Joy's seemingly straightforward question, a reassertion of his right to maintain nuanced positions on complex issues, and a reminder to everyone watching that public figures don't actually owe simplistic sound bites to journalists try and create viral moments. Was JoyBehar wrong to ask a question? That's debatable. Journalists have a responsibility to ask tough questions, to press public figures on their positions, to create moments of clarification that help voters make informed decisions. Did Matthew dodge a legitimate inquiry, or did he brilliantly expose media manipulation? Again, reasonable people can disagree. Should celebrities who engage in political advocacy be expected to stake out clear positions on related political issues? Or should they be allowed the same space for nuance and complexity that we grant to regular citizens? These questions don't have simple answers, which is precisely the point Matthew was making. The issue of responsible gun policy, like most important political questions, exists in shades of gray that resist simple binary categorization. Solutions require thoughtful analysis, careful consideration of competing values and priorities, willingness to engage with complexity rather than retreating into ideological certainty. And that perhaps is exactly what Matthew McConaughey was trying to communicate all along. Not through direct statements that could be clipped and shared and weaponized, but through the very act of refusing to participate in a system that demanded he reduce complex thoughts to simplistic declarations. In that moment on The View, Matthew didn't just avoid a trap. He exposed an entire system of media manipulation, modeled a different way of engaging with loaded questions, and reminded millions of exhausted Americans that you don't have to play games designed to make you lose. Sometimes the most powerful move is simply refusing to play at.